welcome to the Universal Dreams Radio with your host, Dr. Brenda L. and Donny Winter. Follow your heart, for only you know which path is right for you. Universal Dreams Radio is about how spirituality intersects with nearly every other aspect of our life, even when we do not see it or realize it. Spirituality intersects with nearly every other aspect of our life, even though, I'm going to say that again, creativity and expression are our connections to the spiritual energy many seek to understand, and our identity is forged through the process. And Universal Journey seeks to help illuminate the different intersections between creativity, spirituality, and identity in order to empower and enlighten. Tonight's topic is, do we have a dependence on tools for divination? If you'd like to give us a call, our call-in number is 347-850-8292. Welcome, Donny.
Hello, Brenda dear. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good, other than rereading what I read. Gee whiz. That's what happens.
Maybe you were meant to reread it, because it was the creativity and expression part.
There you go. Maybe that's what it is. It's a great topic, though, I tell you.
Oh, right. And it is a very good topic, because for our show, many people are aware that we do readings. And what most people probably do not know is that we do not use any tools to assist us in the readings. We don't use tarot, we don't use runes, we don't use oracle cards, we don't use tea leaves, palmistry, none of that. And it's perfectly okay if people do, a lot of people do, but one thing that we are trying to convey to everyone is that the greatest tool for divination that they could ever possibly have is their own intuition.
Absolutely.
And most people don't realize that they have this tool until they are exposed to it. And as you know, Brenda, over the past year or so, I have gone through this transformation myself, because I always believed that I needed tools in order to perceive things in people's lives, and that's completely not the case. In fact, what we don't realize when we use tools is that if it wasn't for our intuition in the first place, we wouldn't be able to use the tools anyway.
And that's true. The other thing, though, what I found out with using tools, and it's not, I've used tools when I first started out, and that's the key right there, is you can use tools, you can hone your skill with the tools and things like that, along with raising your energy, getting into the alpha state or a little bit higher, and figuring out and feeling what it is and how it is that you're receiving that information. And once you get comfortable with that aspect, you no longer need those tools. However, throughout the years for me, what I realized is I was an odd man or woman out, because I didn't use tools in any of my readings, and individuals wanted tools, because they didn't want to believe that we ourselves could get this information. They wanted to believe that that information came through the tools that we use.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there to show that you don't need those tools. Yes, when you first start out, they are great, because that gives you an awareness of what it feels like to be in that particular state of mind and being.
Mm-hmm.
So,
it's interesting that you mention that, because people have a dependence on the tools, even the people who are getting the readings, because I have had situations like that before too. I'm going to share a story. This was a person I was giving a reading for wanted me to use a specific tool instead of another specific tool, because I have always been most comfortable with reading rune stones as opposed to tarot. And she was like, well, I'm only used to tarot. I want you to use tarot because that's what I'm used to. And I'm like, well, you'll get a more accurate reading if I use runes and all of that jazz. And that's just an example of how people are specifically dependent on a specific, wow, if I see the word specific one more time, I'm going to go crazy. They are dependent. They are dependent on what they're used to, and I don't think that's necessarily a, good thing, because people need to realize that it's just a tool. It's not the intuition behind the tool.
And that's very true. And for people to say that tarot cards and some of these other things are the devil's work, well, I have to disagree, because if it wasn't for our intuition and being able to read what comes up for face value on the cards, you wouldn't get it. They would just be like regular playing cards. Now, I say that haphazardly, because in the old days, and we still have individuals who do that, they use regular playing cards to give readings. And that's how they got around this scare and stuff like that way back when, that they covered up.
And the interesting thing is like, I always hear that divination is a sin from like a lot of Christians, right? Well, the thing is, they don't realize that many prophets and seers and stuff like that actually used divination way back before people started saying that it was evil. Like, people who believed in God did use divination. Whether, like, I know I've heard instances where people way back then have used, like, angelic cards or cards connected with various higher heavenly beings in order to, help them get some form of answer or some sort of direction. And for people to say that it's a sin or that it's the devil's work, they don't really understand that, well, they also used it in their own religion.
Right.
So,
right, and that's very true. Part of the reason that they were told that it was a sin is control purposes, so that they couldn't divine what is coming for them or coming toward them and others. So the Native Americans have been using a form of spirituality and divination and stuff like that for a very, very long time. A very long time. Shamans today still use it. They don't use tarot cards or anything like that, but they use other tools. And they are very good at what they do, and they're very good at healing through the use of those type of tools.
Exactly.
So how could it be wrong? How could it be bad? How could it be evil if you're helping people?
Exactly. Before we move forward, I decided to research the definition of divination to clarify it to people, okay? Now, if you go to dictionary.com, it has 3 different noun definitions for divination. I tried doing research on other sites for, different things regarding people who don't use any tools for divination, and I could barely find anything. In fact, most people on their individual sites said that divination is perceiving through the use of tools. They never said anything about just simple intuition. And here is the definition from dictionary.com. The first one is divination is the practice of attempting to foretell future events or discover hidden knowledge by occult or supernatural means. It also means augury or prophecy. And the third definition is perception by intuition, instinctive foresight. And I think a lot of people ignore that last definition there, because people associate, like you were saying, people lump that intuition with the use of a tool instead of being like, oh, I have this tool and I'm just using these tools to kind of, help me along. And it's perfectly okay to do that. I did it for a long time. Sometimes I still use my tools. But deep down, I'm going to be more precise if I listen to myself.
But it takes a little while to get to trust yourself along this process. That's why tools are good for starting out. Once you get to the point to where you can trust the information that you're receiving, then and only then should you go forward without the tools.
Exactly. Now, have you ever used tools?
I have. I've not used tools I can tell you that I've not used tools in the public. Okay, I've only used tools to be able to show me and get me to understand and feel what it feels like to be in a higher state of consciousness, so I'll know when I'm in the zone. That's the basically only time that I've used tools.
Interesting. So it's never been like a reading situation, like for another person for you. You know, thinking back on tools, I don't really get readings often, but there was this one reading that I went to, and this woman she seemed very enthusiastic about giving readings and everything, but while doing the reading, she was using tarot cards. While doing the reading, I could tell that the cards were getting in the way of what she was actually perceiving, because she was getting one thing, but the cards were saying something different, and she was like, well, I don't know what to say, and yada, yada, and looking back on that, I realized, wow, I think that was her own intuition being like, you need to pick something. You can't, use both all the time, because you're silencing your own voice, your own intuitive voice. And I try to be conscious of that now myself, too, because, you don't want to give a person very confusing responses, because that's not going to do anything for them,
Well, and that's where you have most of your tarot card readers. They don't necessarily read the card. The card flips up. They get the information, and they just blurt out the information that they receive. Now, the card is only used to show them, okay, this is the direction to go in and things like that. At least that's my perception. Because I have used tarot cards before. Not the normal tarot cards. Okay, I've used Celtic cards and things to that extent, and that's where I was able to tune in to that particular deck and say, okay, this is what's happening here. The only reason that I do use them anymore, and it's funny because you're told that you can't or you shouldn't, but I use them for guidance for myself, not for anybody else. So that's what I do, is I use them for guidance for myself. And it's helped me out. And like I said, I've been told, okay, a psychic or a medium or whoever uses a tarot card are not supposed to use or cannot use a tarot card for themselves. Now, I could tell you why, because most of the time we can't step out of our own energy to be able to give a correct or receive correct information. Once you are able to step out of your own energy, your own thought patterns, your own wants and needs, and you're there like you're talking to someone else, then you'll be able to get a pretty good, accurate reading for the most part.
Exactly. And I've heard that, too, that most readers are like, oh, don't use anything for yourself, because, and I've actually heard them say it's also personal gain. And here are my thoughts on the whole personal gain thing. Personal gain, a lot of time to me, is when you do something for yourself while harming other people at the same time. If you are, or if you're putting out negative energy and harming them in that way at the same time, not just, physically or verbally hurting them, but it encompasses that too. But if you are using your gifts to help find answers for yourself, that way you can use your gifts more effectively or find your direction, I don't feel that there is any harm in that. I feel like that is negative.
No, I don't either, because what I always done, and I still do every once in a while, is I will get guidance for, if I'm stuck, I want to know if I can go, which direction I need to go, or what I need to look at. And I fall back on, most of the time, the ruins, because the ruins for me is very special as well. And they'll give me a generalization, and they'll also remind me of what I need to do, like slow down, wait, or okay, this is coming into play for you, and things like that. That's what I do. I don't use it to harm or anything like that, and I don't use it for personal gain either. Personal gain, and as in monetary funds or hurting people or whatever. It's just for a directional process for me.
Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sure there are people out there who do use them for personal gain, or who use them for like very negative purposes. And I don't know if I have shared this on one of our shows. I can't remember. I know I've told you about it before, but when I first was introduced into reading runes, when I realized that I was actually, pretty damn good at it, everyone around me was like, oh my gosh, you need to give us readings and all that jazz. And at one point, I had a friend who wanted me to use the runes and help her do a seance via Ouija board. And I was like, I really didn't understand that there were, do's and don'ts back then. And I was like, sure, why, what harm could come of it? But deep down, though, my intuition, something in there was like, Of course, I shut it up. I was like, shut up, intuition. I don't care what you have to say. Well, I did this. I participated in this situation, this, seance, because the runes are very, very powerful, and they can enhance different situations like that. And what happened is I was basically robbed of the ability to read them for about a month or two. Like every time I tried reading them, the energy was just sucked right out of me. And I was sick for about a month or so. And keep in mind, I'm the kind of person, I rarely get sick. And I got really, really sick. So that to me was like, okay, if I'm going to use tools for divination, I need to be able to listen to my own intuition first. And I really didn't understand, I didn't look back on this until about a year ago, and I was like, even before I started using that in that situation, my intuition was already talking to me. My intuition was already intuiting, and I harm myself by not listening to it. And I think a lot of people do that too.
Well, through that process, though, Donny, is when you do something like that, you also learn. You learn what you can do and what you can't do, your limitations. The thing with certain divination tools, certain divination tools, is you have to respect them. If you don't respect them, they're not going to respect you, and they're not going to work for you. And I can give you an example of one. It's not necessarily a divination tool, but I suppose it could be considered that, is the singing bowl. If you're not in the right frame of mind and that energy and everything else, it will not ring for you. Okay, you have to be in a certain frame of mind, and you have to respect that tool for it to be able to work for you. And if it doesn't, it is not yours, number one. And if it is yours, it's upset at you for neglecting it, which is reminding me of my tools upstairs. Now, I do use the singing bowls and stuff like that to raise the energy and the vibration of myself. So they have to be respected. You have to respect them. You cannot put them in harm's way like what you did there, Donny.
Exactly.
But you learn a lesson from that.
Right. But again, that wouldn't have happened if I would have respected my own intuition, too, in the first place.
Right. But
and I understand
you don't do stuff like that.
Could have researched it first.
Not everything is researchable.
Well, and I agree with that, but I could have gone and talked to other people, which I thought of that but didn't do, and I could have learned it that way instead of harming myself to that extent in the process.
Right.
Don't get me wrong, I am all for learning experiences. Learning experiences are awesome, but I think it's also important for people to try to learn in a way that doesn't harm them in the as well.
Sometimes we just go beyond our intuition and say, "I act with it," and then it gets zapped. Hey, I still do it to this day. I mean, there are things like, I got this, and then all of a sudden, Bam! Yeah, you got this all right. Now you're going to be off your feet, not necessarily off your feet, but you're going to be put on a hold or on ice for a little while, and then your abilities are going to be zapped. And I had that. I did something like that about maybe a year or two ago now, and oh my gosh, did I ever? That was the goofiest thing I ever did, but I did learn a lot, and I also gained a lot of respect. I thought I lost a spiritual aspect, but I didn't. They were upset at me, but I did amend it. So that was huge for me.
Well, it's good that you amended it.
Yeah.
And see, the thing is people just kind of throw themselves into things too.
Yeah.
And like, I think if you want to develop your abilities, if you want to, I can't think of another way of saying it, but enhance yourself, you need to introspect. You can't just, like, I'm the advocate of not throwing yourself into it. Although sometimes it's necessary and sometimes it happens inadvertently, but I think it's important to learn about things and then put them into practice. Granted, that could be my, college student mindset that causes that, but research can do.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, to research it, but I'm telling you, not everything you can research. And for me, I'm jumping in with both feet. If I get in trouble, I get in trouble. I'll jump in. It's like, okay, I learned that lesson. All right, we'll try to do it a little bit differently next time. So I'm all
what's
about
the next lesson, right?
Huh?
I said, oh, well, what's the next lesson, right?
Yeah, really. I mean, but you have to experiment. I'm serious about this. You have to experiment with this stuff, but in a way that you don't harm yourself to an extent that you can't get help or you can't get out of it yourself. And my thing is that if you're going to do any of this stuff, you need to learn how to protect yourself first. That is huge. Huge.
This is true. Although, like you were saying earlier, Brenda, sometimes you have to throw yourself into it, even unprotected, which I have done many times.
Yeah. Just make sure that you know someone that you could go to be able to catch you when you fall. Luckily, right. I have a lot of individuals out there that I can trust, and both in the spiritual realm and also in the physical realm if I need any help. So and they're pretty good.
Well, really though, this all comes back to intuition, because we can't protect ourselves if we don't cultivate our own intuition. Okay, because how are we going to be able to perceive? I don't know. I think one needs to be perceptive one needs to develop that sense so they can know when and where to protect themselves as well.
I would say.
I mean, you don't have to agree with me if you don't want to. That's why we're sharing our perspectives.
True, because again, I've been doing this for quite some time, and I know that you've been doing it for several years. And I say several years because it's been, 4 or 5 years now that you've been doing it?
It's been since I started my undergraduate degree, so it's been about several years, I'd say, yeah.
Okay, all right. So, and I know for me, this is one of the things that I have learned is when you go in to do something, make sure that you protect yourself. And even, your intuition isn't really telling you that you have to protect yourself, but it sure in the heck gives you warning signs when you get over your head.
Mm-hmm.
So pay attention, even though there's a lot of times I'm like, yeah, all right, sure, no, I'm going to do this, and zap.
Yeah, same here. Well, Brenda, dear, did you want to take our first break?
Yes. And welcome back to Universal Journeys with your host, Dr. Brenda L. and Donny Winter. And our topic tonight is Do we have a dependence on tools of divination or not? Our telephone call, yes, our telephone call is soon to be answering here pretty soon. Our phone number is 347-850-8292. Donnie, do you have some plugs for us?
I totally do. Okay, so if you like listening to our show and you want to interact with us more, if you go to Facebook and find our Facebook page, you'll be able to do that. If you just type in Universal Journeys on the Facebook search bar, you should be able to find us there. Also, if you are typing it in the URL bar, if you do facebook.com/Universal Journeys, is it 111? Yeah, Universal Journeys 1. 1-1.
Yep.
Then you can find us there. Also, we're in the process of getting our shows posted onto YouTube. So if you are more comfortable with using YouTube as a means to listen to things, if you type in Universal Journeys Radio, you should be able to find us on there too. So, yes, back to you, Brenda.
Okay. Well, when we were on break, Donnie was saying, maybe people don't know what the alpha state is. And so I'm like, okay, I can do this. The alpha state, I'm going to read just a little bitty blurb here from I don't even know where this comes. Anyhow, it has to do with the YouTube channel, okay? So it states, the alpha state is the state your brain goes into just between being fully awake and totally asleep. It is an actual electrical frequency that can be measured by sensitive neurological equipment. If you want to find out more about the alpha state, you can go on youtube.com. What is the alpha state and how do I reach it? So maybe they have a little bit easier way than what I did.
So if we're going to cultivate our intuition and learn how to use it to do readings instead of using tools, you mentioned something about needing to know how to place yourself in the alpha state.
Yes.
And my question is, how do you do that?
Well, like I told you earlier, or suggested earlier, what I did is I started out with the tarot cards. The other thing I did too, and it gave me an interesting feeling in my brain, okay, because that's where for me was the focus, because I'm a brainy person. I like intellectual conversations and certain things with that. I like intellectual, period. And anyhow, so the brain, it was lighter, it tingled, and that's how I could tell. I felt like I was a little bit floating when I was in the alpha state. Now, you can get into the alpha state via using a tool, or you can do it by getting into a meditation. Meditation is a great way with that. So when people tell you, to meditate and do this, there's many, many beneficial things that come from meditation. And this happens to be one. And you can get into a lot of different telepathy. Telepathy is another one that you can get into by just doing this. I mean, you have these churches and everything else that are out there, and I don't mean just Catholic churches or Christian churches or whatever. All of these individuals who sit down to pray, or that's a form of meditation. Use it a little bit differently. I don't care if you're praying for someone or whatever, you're still getting yourself up into that higher level of consciousness, the alpha state. And the reason you're going into alpha state versus beta, delta, or gamma is because once you get into the other ones, you're sleeping for the most part. But the alpha state is that state in between, just before you go to sleep and you're still awake. And I could dream in that type of state too, which is kind of neat. I know that I'm out because I'm listening to stuff out there, but I also know that I'm in and I'm aware of my dream. So it's kind of
mostly fun. It's just a deeper awareness.
Yes.
Interesting.
By being in the alpha state, you're sort of kind of getting your logical brain disconnected a little bit, so that your right side of your brain or your spiritual brain can actually function. The intuitive side of your brain can function. That's basically what you're doing.
That's really interesting that you mentioned logical versus intuition. And in a lot of ways, I think that's why people a lot of the time depend on tools, because tools give them something more concrete and logical to look at, instead of simply visualizing it intuitively or creatively in your mind. And so I guess the fact of the matter is people need to start cultivating the ability to set aside that whole logical, hands-on kind of perspective and start, looking inward more and using that as the tool.
Well, the biggest challenge, especially if you're a logical person, the biggest challenge is getting out of your logical mind. And by using the tools, you're actually making your logical brain function or focus on the tool, where it allows your spiritual side or your intuitive side to flourish, to come out, because you're doing something logically with that logical side of your brain. So there are many people who have to use that particular tool or a tool to do that, because the brain has to focus, or the left side of the brain or right side of the brain, depending on which your dominant is. But your logical side of the brain has to focus on something and try to figure it out, because that's exactly what the logical brain does. So if the logical brain is trying to figure out what this is, that allows the other side of the brain, the intuitive side of the brain, to function and work. That's why you have symbology. That's why you do rituals. That's why you do these things, to make that logical side say, okay, now I can believe this is happening because I'm doing it this way. It's giving a step-by-step approach to it. And then once the logical side of the brain says, okay, we can do this, then you're like, woo, I'm here, and you could do it. And then you don't need the tools.
Exactly, and I can speak from experience that is something that I have gone through. Because you know me, Brenda. I have a fairly logical brain, and I depend on logic a lot, to the point where I think that dependence takes a lot away from me, because being able to intuit involves your creative expression. And if you don't honor that, it's going to start interfering with your life. And personally, for me, I would get really exhausted and frustrated and stressed out by simply focusing on that logical side, especially when doing readings. When I first started doing readings, I remember getting really upset because I felt like I wasn't perceiving well enough, that I wasn't reading well enough. And that was because I was like, okay, I need to know what each of these cards or runes mean. I need to have the book with me. I need to read it. I need to blah, 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 all these different tools. When in all actuality, I could have done it without all of that.
Yeah, but the thing is because you did have to do what you did, and what it is you have to learn. You have to learn when you can and you can't. Now, it is good that people do start out with tools. I'm just saying.
Right. I agree. I agree.
Yeah. So, but you don't have to stick with the tools all the time. If you're getting it, you're getting it without the tools. Why bother using tools other than for other people? So, I know a lot of good psychics, a lot of good mediums and stuff like that. And not all of them use tools, but the majority of them use tools. And for me, it's like, you're talking to me generally. You don't need those tools because you're already getting the information. Why are you doing it? And that's why I asked a couple different readers, and they said it's because the client wants to see the tool. They have to be able to see the tool to get it, to feel comfortable with the information that's coming through. And the shamans do the same thing. When they do their things, their healing processes with their feathers and their sage and everything else, all that is to help the individual client that they are doing that ritual for, to get their logical side of the brain into what is happening. Technically, they don't have to do it. They could just do it mentally, and it'll be done. However, in order for the client to believe that they've actually had something done to them, they have to see those tools, and they have to see them in use.
No, and you're right. And I guess the point that I didn't necessarily make something because I was getting sidetracked. I was thinking I was being too logical. My point was the fact that, it is important to, I think, start out with tools because they do help cultivate your intuition more, because they gradually, it shows you that you are capable of perceiving more and more. But I guess what I was trying to say was aimed at people who depend on intuition or on tools for a long, long period of time.
Right.
And never know, I firmly believe that there are signs that tell you when you're ready to reach beyond tools. And I think I noticed this too, and I was avoiding it though, but you were the one that pointed it out to me a long while back. You were like, Donny, you're capable of doing this. Why aren't you doing this?
You betcha.
And I was like,
I was on your case for a little while too.
I know you were. And I was just like, but, and you were like, no.
No, and then, you can do this.
I think it also comes down to needing a sense of security for the reader as well as the person getting the reading.
Yes.
Because the reader knows that as long as they have those tools in front of them, the tools are going to at least say something.
Yep.
And I think, and I intuit this feeling from many readers, the fact that that's how they feel too. And they will say whatever, even if the card or rune has a specific meaning, even if that meaning doesn't apply to the person, they will say it anyway because they assume that the person getting the reading won't know any better. Right. Which a person needs to be careful, because there are people who get readings who are intuitives, who are sensitives, and if you kind of detract from your intuitive state, they'll be able to notice that. And that's where I started realizing, you know what, just depending on all of these things is going to end up damaging me in the long run, because people are going to start thinking that I'm unreliable. And it'll start with me feeling unreliable in myself. Because, like I said, I would get frustrated and upset because I felt like I wasn't reading well enough. Well, there was a reason for that. It was because I wasn't paying heed to my own intuition. This didn't happen when I first started out, though. It happened a few years into me giving readings, because there was a point where I was just like, oh, I need to do a reading. I need to get these tools out and blah. And I just, I did not feel passionate about it because I depended on objects as opposed to my own self.
And that's true. The other thing, too, to think about, I'm just going to throw a crescent wrench in here, is sometimes the individuals who are using the tools and only using the tools and not using their intuition and stuff like that, but they make other people think that they're really good at what they do, are charlatans. So you really have to be careful about that. So you have a lot of very experienced tarot card readers, psychic readers, mediums, and so on and so forth. But you have those individuals, those other ones, who just want to do it to make money, and they don't know what the heck they're doing. And they're not giving a good reading. They're just giving generic readings, the same generic reading, to everybody that they come in contact with or sits down in front of them. And to me, I mean, I've seen that. And I'm like, no. I even had clients come up to me and say, I thought you were going to tell me the same thing as you told someone else and stuff like that. I said, nope, not happening with me, because whatever flows through is coming out.
Exactly.
Good, bad, or indifferent.
Exactly. Well, and I think people who get readings often get used to get used to people saying the same thing. Even it doesn't necessarily have to be one person. It could be, multiple readers. And the problem with depending on tools so much is that, like you mentioned, the generic, reading, they will say generic things. They will be like, oh, there is a change in your future. Well, gee, that's not very descriptive, is it? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of change? Am I going to change my underwear? Am I going to, change career? Like, what kind of change? Like I feel like that dependence prevents a certain level of, complexity or, descriptiveness that is necessary. Clarity, that's the word I'm thinking of.
Clarity,
It prevents a sense of clarity, and the thing that helps people getting readings feel secure is clarity. And clarity also helps the person giving the readings feel more secure. If they feel like the cards aren't being clear, that's because they aren't listening to their intuition either. And I'm telling you, I mean, the intuition versus the tools, you need to be able to listen first before they are clear.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to throw another curse wrench in here, Donny.
Okay.
I can tell you that sometimes even people like myself and like yourself, we do come up with the generic stuff because that's what we're given. And I think what the reasoning behind that is because the individual asking the question is very generic in their thought pattern.
Right.
So with people like you and I and other people, we read the energies around the body. And whatever energies that we receive is what we're going to receive. Now, if that individual is blocking or they say a generic or ask a generic question, or they're blocking that information, 9 times out of 10, you're going to get something that's incorrect.
Well, and it's interesting, too, because I also know that people who try to force, clarity out of you, because there are some people who you'll give readings to who try to force it out of you. That's another instance when, vagueness is going to come in, because if you try to force it, it's not going to come. And if it does, it'll be in very small bits and that aren't very informative. Right. So when going... Go ahead, Brenda.
I was going to say, so when some of that non-clarity comes through, too, it also means that you have to sometimes go around the bush, and I say around the bush, to get to another aspect, until you get to your core issue that you needed to get to all along. It's just like they're thinking of all these other things, and you had to get around all of those to get to where you really need to talk to them. And maybe it's just to relax them, too. I don't know what it is, but I know it's happened to me several times. Like, that's what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes maybe you're not supposed to know it. Maybe you're just supposed to know that there's something that's coming into your life or whatever, and you're not ready to know the whole thing, because if you know the whole thing, then guess what? They're gone. It's done.
Right. Exactly.
They won't go through it.
And I've talked about this before. I am a major stickler for people who get the readings coming, I'm just going to say clients. I am a major stickler for clients coming in also with an open mind, with, a need for clarity, because a lot of the time people will come in expecting certain things, and if they expect those things, they're not going to get a good reading, because they're projecting that energy out there. That energy is trying to force an answer, when an answer shouldn't be forced. It should just be allowed to occur if there is an answer.
Right. If you have an agenda, it's gonna go haywire 9 times out of 10.
Exactly. And I've had many instances where I've tried giving readings where, I'll intuit something, and then they'll be like, oh, well, no, not really. Like, no. And I'm like, immediately, that just kind of, stabs at my barriers and disrupts everything. And I'm just like, okay, how do you expect me to give you a reading if you're not going to be open to one in the first place?
Right. And that's...
No, go ahead.
I'm going to say, and unfortunately, when you have something like that happen, that individual is messing with themselves, but they're also messing with you, and it could throw you off your game. And it's not a game, but it can throw you off your confidence, and then it takes a little while to build that confidence back up And I can give you an example. When I first started doing readings in the public, my very first time, I had two people. I don't know if I said this on the air before or not, but I'm going to say it again. I had two people. The first one came in. She sat down with me. She wanted to really be with someone else, but that other person was busy, so she sat down with me, and I did my little tuning exercise and stuff like that I do. And I started blurting out information about her and other things, and she didn't want to know about that. She wanted to know about her children. And really the information that was coming out, she needed to hear, but she didn't want to hear it.
Oh, yeah.
So she's like, oh, that's not right, that's not right, that's not right. So that threw me off. That threw my confidence off big time. And so after the reading, I'm like, thank God she's gone. Oh, my gosh, type of deal. But it threw me off so much that I had to go get something to try to ground me or to help me to get up and back into the alpha state and get out of that quagmire that I was in, if you want to call it that. So I went over, and the individuals that put on the show, they had a bunch of crystals and stuff like that. And I love crystals. You can use crystals for divination. I love crystals. So I went over there, and I'm looking at all the crystals, and there was one particular one that drew me to it. And there really wasn't crystals like a gemstone or whatever. Anyhow, and I didn't know what it was because I was just getting in it. I knew what a quartz was. Okay, I know it. But this particular one, I picked it up, and I'm like, wow, this is drawing me to it. So when I took it over and I bought it, and when I was buying it, I was asking the gal there what it was, and she told me it was an angelite. I'm like, really? Wow, that's kind of cool. So I went over and I looked at it, and I held it, and I felt its energy and stuff like that. And I sit back down, and I'm trying to get rid of all of that energy from before, the reading before. And then all of a sudden another gal came in, and I think she was actually associated with the one that that was there. Anyhow, so she came over, and she sat down, and I tuned in, and I'm talking about this individual in the wheelchair and what he looked like, and then he was doing a jig, okay? So I'm like, all right, I got to tell you this. All right, this is what I see. I see this man in a wheelchair. He's got a bald head, and all of a sudden he gets up out of the wheelchair, and he starts doing a jig. And she's like, oh, my God, he's got his legs back. That was her husband, who had lost his legs before he passed away, and he was in a wheelchair for quite some time, and he would come back to show her that he had his legs back.
Mm-hmm.
And then I continued with the reading, and then after the reading, she stood up in front of everybody in that whole room, and she said, she is good. I'm like, yes. But that was my first two experiences of ever doing anything in the public for public reading. That was wild. That was crazy.
Well, I've just had a few interesting situations as well. The first one, I think I've mentioned this to you. I gave a reading to someone who was drunk once, and it did not make sense. And the drunk person was getting frustrated, and it just was not meant to happen. And I think it's also important for people who do readings to consider who they should do readings for and who they shouldn't do readings for.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's very important to choose that.
I do too, because anybody that's been drinking, that energy is sporadic. It is not whole and complete, or it's just all over the place, and it's very, very hard to pick up on energy to give any sort of good reading from that or with that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like, if someone's drinking, I don't like giving them a reading. I refuse.
Right. Well, and it all comes down to the fact that I think people who go in for readings I think there should be a certain degree of reading etiquette.
Mm-hmm.
Just going to throw that out there. You don't go into a reading impaired. You don't go into a reading being combative. You don't be disrespectful to the reader, and don't be disrespectful to the energies either.
Right.
Because
right.
I mean, you're never gonna learn anything. You're never gonna understand the information coming to you. Heck, you may not even get any information. You're gonna block it. You'll damn it, basically.
And that's basically what they do.
And in the long run, who does that harm? That harms them. And if you go into a reading and do this to someone who is new to giving readings, not only are you going to disrupt them, but you're going to disrupt all the readings that they give after you.
Part of the thing with that is they don't know who is new. I mean, like a new person versus someone who is new that's been doing it for years. The only issue.
Well, that, and also, well, regardless, they should go in, not in that kind of mindset, regardless if it's a new person or an experienced person. So, I mean, and I also think for the person giving the readings, they shouldn't be combative either, because that's not going to solve anything. That's not going to make it more clear.
And that's true, too. Another thing with all of that is I don't like the other end of the spectrum either, where someone comes in and they hang on to every word you say. They live that every word. And to me, that's not good, because you have individuals out there as intuitives that will tell you something with not even thinking about the consequences that you put out there. That's like telling someone when they sit down in front of you, oh, yeah, you have 2 years to live. And I'm telling you what, if you do that, and that person is like hanging on to every word you said, in 2 years, you damn better believe that they're going to die, because they believed it so much.
Yep.
So there has to be, you have to have etiquette on both sides of the spectrum. You have to.
It comes down to being aware of the energy you're putting out there, and if you put out energy like that, of course, it'll make it much more likely to happen if you do.
Yep, and you better be careful, because you have a responsibility to your clients. And
not to mention a responsibility to yourself and to your gift. Because in a way, I think that disrespects your gift.
That's exactly right. And you don't want to do that. You want to respect your client. You want to respect you. You want to respect the energies that you deal with each and every day, your guides, your angels, all of them. You want to respect all of them. So just there's a proper etiquette for everything. You're not always told what the etiquette is, but there is a proper etiquette. With that said, it is 8 o'clock, and we are going to go on break. And welcome back to Universal Journeys with your host, Dr. Brenda L. Bates and Donny Winter. Our call-in number here is 347-850-8292, and we're discussing, do we have a dependence on tools of divination? Yes or no? So, Donny, it's over to you now.
All right. Before we get into the thick of things, I'm going to do another shameless plug. As most of you know, if you've watched our show, if you've listened to our show, you know that I am also very active on YouTube. I do a lot of LGBT activism, anti-bullying advocacy, and I do a lot of, I feel like I do a lot of sensual conversations. Sensual, not sexual. I'm just making sure that I said that correctly so nobody misinterpreted it. And lately I've been doing, I just want to talk about this for a second, if that's okay. I've been doing a video series titled Bullying, My Story of Survival. And, if we come back to the whole intuition discussion, that the act of doing these videos and forcing myself to remember and reflect on these things has opened my intuition so much. And yes, it's been a very difficult experience because I've been facing a lot of really bad memories, but it's helped me feel more fulfilled. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I think everyone, in order to find intuition, they need to challenge themselves. Okay?
Mhm. Mhm.
And if you're the kind of person who has gone through similar things, if you've been bullied too, if you are still struggling, healing from it, I encourage you to watch the series. If you go to youtube.com and type in Donny Winter, Donny, and Winter is in the season, then you'll be able to find my video series. So I encourage you to watch it and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Okay, so...
I tell you, I'm going to just do another thing here for you. I'm telling you, I listened to or watched all 4 of Donny's YouTube things.
The videos.
And the videos, thank you. And by when I was doing that, it brought out some things that I had hidden away way back in, the banks and things in my brain here. It brought up some of those things, and I was able to connect with them and weep a little bit, and also to understand Donny a little bit more and what he has gone through. And again, it's amazing. If you get a chance, go check it out and be healed, because it is a healing process. So,
thank you, Brenda. I appreciate that.
You are most welcome.
And I can honestly say I've gotten a lot of really good feedback on it too. I've gotten messages from many people about those videos, and again, I think it all comes down to honesty. Being honest with yourself helps you open your mind to different possibilities, and that is one of the first steps, I think, to furthering your own intuition.
Yep,
okay, so when we left off our last segment of the show, we were discussing. My mind is blanking. What were we discussing? Okay. We were talking about reading etiquette, and we're going to kind of bring things back and talk about the divination itself again, because psychometry, for those of you who do not know, is a type of divination where you have inanimate objects in front of a person, and they pick it up or they gravitate toward it, and then you give them a reading based on the object that they choose. I think, if I remember correctly, Brenda, you've done readings like this before.
I have done, yes. I wouldn't say natural. I wouldn't say something that I do very often, but it was in an exercise that I did do this. And it is very interesting on how when you focus, not a hard focus, but when you allow things to come to you, when you have that object within your hand or your grasp. Mm-hmm. Now, the divination tool at that particular point is, guess what? Your hand. Because in your hand, in the palm of your hand, it's like little eyes. And that's why you see some of these really kind of old movies that have these eyes that are in these people's hands. I might be telling my age here too, but you do have like little eyes or little sensories in the palm of your hand. So when you have something or someone's in your hand and you close your eyes and you just kind of lightly focus on it, you'll receive information. The key to receiving information and getting it right is to blurt it out. Don't try to analyze it, but to blurt it out to that individual. This is what I see. This is what I feel. This is what I hear. This is, what I'm, all of that stuff. Tasting, even tasting is a part of that. So that's the key, is just blurt, 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 blurt. Don't burp it, but blurt it. And without thinking about it, it's like, okay, this is all getting boop, 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 boop. And because the more you analyze it, the worse it's going to get. And remember, the message is not for you, it's for them. So blurt it out, blurt it out, blurt it out. Now, when you go through that process, let me finish. When you go through that process, always remember, too, that you're going to get some of your stuff that comes up as well. That does not mean that it's not there, and you need to listen to what you're telling the other person and to do it for yourself as well. Go ahead, Donnie. Now you can go.
Well, and I was going to kind of add on to what you said at first when you were talking about the hand being a tool. I also believe that the object is a tool too. And my question, well, I think it's a tool because it's a physical object. And and I've talked to some people who have done psychometry before, and they have associated very specific things with every object, and they've repeated that in every reading. And that kind of said to me, that they were depending on what they thought the predisposed meaning of the object was.
Mm-hmm.
When in all actuality, it's all about the energy of the individual and the energy of the object interacting with one another. At least I think that.
Right.
So my question to you, Brenda, is psychometry also one of those things that people could depend on too much as a tool? Do you think that?
No, because I don't look at, and this is where we differ here, I don't look at what an individual gave me of their own or their ancestors or whatever. I don't look at that as a tool. I look at that as energy. And again, the tool is me. I'm the tool. Because if you listen to your body can't lie. So it's going to tell you exactly what's going on. Now, with that said, I'm going to say one other thing, too, is not everyone's going to be able to pick up on energy because people get things differently. The way that we're talking about picking up an energy is we're talking about clairsentient. That's a form of sensing the energy that's in the item or around you or whatever. You also have clairaudience. Clairaudience is where you hear things. And clairvoyance is where you see things through your third eye. And I don't necessarily mean that it's a physical see, but just like your imagination and you're seeing pictures in your mind's eye. So those are the three main ones, but you also have psychometry and other things too. So not everyone's going to get it the same way that we get it. And maybe that's another reason why they have to use the tools that I'm now in that have gone there. Maybe that is why they have to do that. Thought about that.
That was I liked that answer. That was very good. Well, and backtracking a little bit, if a person uses a tool, though, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're depending completely on that tool either. Mm-hmm. Right. And, because, I will sometimes supplement, at least now, I will sometimes supplement, readings with, a rune or a card, because the energy in that object will also interact with the situation. Mm-hmm. And it could perhaps reveal something new, and it could perhaps reveal something that's, not new or nothing at all.
Right.
But I think if a person, the sign that a reader will notice, if they are open to it, that, they, feel dependent on this type of thing, is when they feel like their readings aren't rendering anything. Or if they are feeling very insecure with their own ability to read. That's, to me, when you're depending on tools too much.
Oh, for me, I can tell, this is my thought about that one. My thought is, if an individual sits down in front of you, and before you start using your tool, you're already getting information, you don't need that tool anymore. Plain simple. If you're already getting information about that individual before you even use any of your tools, you don't need that tool. Mm-hmm. However, if the client so chooses that they want that, say, tarot card, or they want that crystal ball, or they want whatever it is, the runes, and if you do that sort of thing, then you should honor your client.
Right. Well, and the thing
for me, I didn't have any of those things.
Well, also, if a person requests that specifically, you need to be able to use your own abilities to siphon what you've gotten already into the reading itself. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Because I know when I first started, I was picking up on things at first, But it changed when I completely depended on the tools because I did not know how to build that bridge between my intuition and what it was telling me to what the tools were telling me. There was no way that I could combine them, so I changed the circumstances, which, I mean, some of the similar information came about, but it was kind of vague. So I think it's important to be able to realize that, you know, even if the person requests the tool, that you need to also honor what you were picking up on this individual in the first place without the tool, too.
Here's a way that I did some of that when I was first getting into this. What I would do just before when I laid down to bed and just before I fell asleep, I said a mantra. My mantra was to integrate the left side of the brain with the right side of the brain and them work together as a team. That's not quite how I said it, but that's close enough. That gives you an example. It's like, okay, I integrate the left side with the right side of the brain, you know, so they're working together. And I said that mantra over and 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 over for a very long time until it was actually starting to work that way. And what you're doing when you do that type of mantra is you're actually retraining the brain. So then you don't have such a hard time switching from logical side to intuitive side. So that helped me. That's a good way of training yourself. It's just by saying the mantra.
I like that,
using tools.
Well, saying a mantra gives you a chance to introspect and apply what you're saying to what you're introspecting. And mantras can also place you in a meditative state, which I think meditation is very important in order to improve intuition. And we've talked about this on shows before. Being able to meditate gives, people don't take the time to look inward. And I think that's where that disconnect comes in with intuition and, you know, being able to perceive the energy around a person. And that was my issue. I couldn't build that bridge. But when I started introspecting more and meditating and using mantras, I felt as though that I understood it more. I learned it. I basically transcended to a new position, basically. Heck, we could, I think at some point we should totally do a show on mantras because, we could go on and on about that. But
yeah, we could. The other thing, too, is when we're talking about tools, and now that we've talked about mantras and saying things over and over and over and over again, we're also talking about prayer. So this tells you that you can use prayer to do the same thing, because even though you're praying for someone, you are still saying that certain thing over and over again. You may say different names, but you're still saying it. That's like using the mala, the Indian mala. You use the mala and you count the beads, or you bring the beads through your fingers, and you may say over and over again, love, love, love. And then as you're breathing in and you're breathing out, you go to the next one, and you're thinking to yourself, love, breathe in, breathe out. You know, you're just breathing in and breathing out. Or you're saying healing, or you're saying, prosperity, or whatever it is. That's still a form. That's a prayer, because you're putting it out there. And as you breathe in and you breathe out, you're raising your energy, your vibrational energy up and out, because you're not focusing on anything else. Again, when you say love and you have that bead in your hand, it's like saying the rosary. When you do that, you are raising and opening up yourself for that divine energy to come in, and for you to be able to send out the healing or whatever it is that you're sending out there in a good manner. So breathing, malas, rosaries, mantras, anything like that. And see, this is why I don't understand about people using or saying that using a divination tool is a sin or it's the devil's work. When we all do it across the board, we don't even realize it. Mother's intuition, that's a natural gift from God. That's where your body is telling you what is happening or going to happen. You get butterflies, and all of a sudden, something happens to your child or something like that. As you're being forewarned, your body's picking up on that energy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not from the devil. You're using energies. You're being connected with those energies for a reason.
Right. Well, and I think a lot of people, no, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that's why, wait, where was I going with that? My train of thought derailed. Keep going with what you were saying.
Well, and I think that, if we stop that intuitive ability that we naturally have because we're afraid it's the devil's work, we're harming ourselves, and we're harming the loved ones around us, because that intuition can help you in many, many different ways. I'll give you an example of that intuition, okay, that happened to me. And this is even before I started any of this stuff. I'm driving from Fayetteville, North Carolina, to Hinesville, Georgia, where I was stationed when I was in the military. I was coming back from seeing my fiance at that particular time. So I'm driving down 95, Interstate 95, and I'm driving, and my mind is out there, and I'm not even really paying attention or whatever that's going on. And all of a sudden, it's like I woke up, and I'm passing a car. And I don't even know how I got out in that lane, because I was so focused on what I was thinking about. But there's something that took over and said, okay, we're going to make sure that you're going to be out in this lane and you're going to go around safely. You're not going to hurt anybody.
Mm-hmm.
There's another time when I was driving, and all of a sudden I heard, brake, and I put my brake on. And if I wouldn't have put my brake on, again, I was thinking, if I wouldn't have slammed my brake on, I would have hit a deer. That's not the devil's work, I'm telling you guys. That's your higher self. That's your God source. I don't care what you call it. That is your angel, guides, whatever. They are there. We are there.
Mm-hmm.
There is no devil in that.
Well, and going back to the whole devil thing, people used that as a barrier, because a lot of the time when a person cultivates their intuition, that if they're afraid of learning, if they're afraid of knowing, they're going to create barriers to prevent people from expressing that knowledge. And I sincerely believe that's what prompted the Salem witch trials as well. People accused other people of being witches because they were intuitive, because they were aware. And in some instances, they accused people of being witches for no apparent reason as well.
Well, because you had individuals that actually healed. You had the healers that used natural herbs and stuff like that, and they were considered witches during that time frame.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's people associate negativity with awareness, with perception. And it all comes down to an individual's insecurity and not wanting to know the information, not wanting to, face the answers that may be out there,
Well, and a lot of them don't want to take responsibility for their own actions. They got to blame it on somebody else. In actuality, it's because of something that you are doing or you did previously that stuff is coming back to get you. That's karma, buddy. That's karma.
Oh, yeah.
And
people will even invalidate the existence of karma itself by saying, it's not real because, and it's like, it's not, like, you don't think it's real because you don't even listen. These different things are happening, and it's possible to notice the repetition. But if you're not going to notice the repetition, then of course it's going to be. I mean, if you force yourself to not notice it, of course it's just going to seem like background noise to you, and of course it's going to seem like it doesn't exist. Right.
It's just kind of crazy how people think of things, and they stop their intuition, and then it's just that's what you're here for. You're here to learn, and when you stifle yourself, believe me, we all do it. When you stifle yourself or when you stop yourself from experimenting or from going forward, you're hurting yourself. The other thing, too, is that is when you're becoming even closer to the true God, the real God, is when you start to develop and start to understand what your role is in everything and how your role or how you project things onto other people and things like that. I mean, if you really get into this stuff in the right way, when you start to meditate, when you start to pray, you become closer and closer to that God source. The only issue with some of that stuff is you get caught up with names like God instead of allowing you to process more. Fear keeps you from really experiencing the true nature of a God source, or what people call God, goddess, higher power, so on and so forth. But if you really did look into other aspects of religions, you're not going to be taken away from the one the one truly that you're drawn to. You are going to enhance it, and I can't say that enough. Right. You may change your perspective a little bit, which is what you really need to do, but it will even be stronger. I may not go to the Catholic Church, okay, or go to Mass on Sundays, but I tell you what, the Catholic Church is the one and only church for me. And the one that I feel more comfortable with, and the one that I follow. I follow the Pope's whatever he does. As a matter of fact, today, out of the blue, I had a bishop from New York and Boston area, like me or follow me on Twitter, which kind of like threw me way off, like, whoa.
Wow.
So I thought that was pretty cool. That in a way it's a compliment, and the other way is like, okay, what's you going to try to say that I'm doing and that I'm. But it is. I mean, it is something different, and don't think that your pastors or your religious people don't have this, because they do. They have the tuition, because they wouldn't know if they didn't. They wouldn't know what God tells them or guides them to do. So they have it. They have it because they pray a lot. You could do the same thing. I can almost guarantee you that the Pope senses things that we don't even realize that he senses, and he's got abilities that, and most priests do, have abilities that they don't even talk about, because they have to say it's something else or whatever.
Well, a lot of people are afraid of talking about these abilities because so many people completely overlook them. And I will say this time and time again. We only use 10% of our brains. What do you think consists of the other 90%?
I'll tell you what, a good movie to watch, and this is kind of a cool movie, at least it was for me anyways, and it's called Lucy. And Lucy, I don't know if you watched this movie before, Donny, or not, but if you haven't, then okay, I would suggest to look at it, because then it goes into what the other percents of the brain all encompass, and what you can do or what happens to Lucy when all of this starts to develop in her. It's amazing. And a lot of it you'll resonate with. And a lot of you are like, whoa, because it's things that we wish that we could do, but we can do, but we don't think we can do. And it's just breaking through those barriers.
Exactly. Well, I'll definitely have to look it up. I think everyone else should too, if it addresses these subjects.
Yeah, it sure does. And I've watched it over and over and over again. That's because that's just the way I am. When I find something nice and good, that's what I normally do. So we are at 8:32, and we are going to take a break. And welcome back to Universal Journeys with your host, Dr. Brenda L and Donny Winter. Follow your heart, for only you know which path is right for you. Tonight, we are talking about, do you have a dependence on tools of divination? Our call-in number is 347-850-8292. And before we get back into there, I do want to make a couple of plugs by myself. And right on the Mysical Awakenings Radio here, we have Smoke and Mirrors. Oh, Beyond Smoke and Mirrors. Sorry about that, guys. Beyond Smoke and Mirrors, Monday nights from 9 to 11. On Tuesday nights from 7 to 9, we have Sacred Journeys. On Wednesdays, 7 to 9, we have Mystical Awakenings. On Friday nights from 7 to 9, we have True Paranormal. And now, just starting out, Saturday nights from 9 to 11, we're going to have What the Hell Was That? It has to do with some paranormal activity and stuff like that. So listen up, because it's right here on Mystical Awakenings Radio. All right,
It's going to be a good show.
I think it's going to be a fun show myself. So, you know, everything and everyone has this intuition, and it depends on what they call it and how they use it and stuff like that. And you have good and bad in everything. So, just, again, I have to go with my themes, follow your heart. You just got to know. I mean, follow your heart.
Well, it also comes down to a person's awareness, because we all have different levels of awareness when it comes to our own intuition. And, I mean, if we go back to the original question that the title of our show poses, do we have a dependence on tools for divination? If I were to answer that question at this point in the show, I would say that not everyone has a dependence on tools for divination, but some people do.
Yes, they do.
You're gonna
well,
say,
and I was going to say,
sorry, you inhaled, so.
Oh, sorry. And then way back when, our religious people used divination. All of them, to a degree. All of them have used some sort of divination. So, how can I be wrong?
Well, I mean, and I don't necessarily think that people. I mean, some people do think it's wrong, but I'm mostly focusing on the readers themselves who. Well, and I knew you knew that, but a lot of them get very insecure about trying to break away from using those tools because they don't feel secure enough in their own ability to perceive things. And honestly, I think if you don't try to break away and experiment with it, you're not going to end up learning. I mean, this comes back to what you were saying earlier. Sometimes you have to throw yourself into it in order to learn.
Oh, yeah, and you learned big time, too. It's like, ooh.
You've
several times.
Been there, done that recently.
Yeah. So we have a caller. Do we want to take a caller?
Of course we do.
Of course we do. Okay, here we go, caller. Get ready. We're coming at you. Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. I just tuned in. I'm not sure what divination is.
Divination is reading for other people, perceiving what the different energies are telling them in their lives. You know, like tarot readings and rune readings are all included in the definition of divination. It's the act of perceiving such things and using the tools to perceive with.
Right.
And
you can use
tools. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm going to say you can use crystal balls as divination. You can use candlelight divination. You can use tea leaves. You can use
the tool.
A water pensive. You can use. What are some of the other things that you can use?
Palmistry. Palmistry is one.
Palmistry. Yep, palmistry. You can use what is called. What is that? What is that called? Something to find water. What is that called?
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Dowsing.
What is it?
Yeah.
Dowsing, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. You can use pendulums. I mean, you can use just about anything for divination.
And since you tuned in a bit late, what we've been discussing is whether or not readers have a dependence, and people getting the readings, whether or not they have a dependence on those tools, when in fact they can actually do readings with their own intuition.
Well, when you hear a voice in your head, what is that? Because
exactly.
That's what I hear. I hear, like...
Exactly.
What is your voice telling you?
Well, I do readings for my friends, and sometimes I use the cards, but I read them different. I'll shuffle the deck, and then I'll read the cards, but I'll keep going till I feel it's done. And then I'll ask them, well, this, that, and the other. But sometimes out of the blue, sometimes people ask me questions, I'll see symbols, or sometimes I just know. Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be, but I don't always have it, but then it comes and goes. Sometimes it's a really gut feeling that I could tell them what I think, and yeah.
I do know what you're talking about, because I get things similar to what you get them. It's like there's a knowing, and I don't know how I know, but I know what I know.
Yeah. And sometimes I do hear it. I hear the insight.
Yes.
Yep.
And it does come and go. And sometimes I have no idea who the individual is that I can all of a sudden hear, when I'm not normally hearing, and I can all of a sudden hear them. I don't know if it's because of the planetary alignment has been in such a way that I could actually could get through. I know that sometimes on a full moon, I'm very clear. I can get things, like they're right there. And other times it just depends on a planetary alignment that actually helps, and also my biorhythm.
And it's weird because I used to think, well, I would think that it came from my guardian angel, or the divine is where I always thought it came from. But I don't know. I mean, yeah.
Well, the thing is
that's where
if it's not harming you, and if it's not telling you to do bad things, you betcha. I mean, you're from what I understand, and from what I've perceived myself, is your angels are never going to tell you to harm yourself or others. Never, ever.
Oh no.
Okay.
But they'll tell me, even when I was growing up and I was having problems with my family, don't go home now. Wait a while. Avoid it, or that's simply putting it to symbolize it. But there's other. I mean, just there's many things. Like one time, a friend wanted something from, say, eBay. They were looking for a certain item. I said, "Oh, I'll get it for you." And all of a sudden, I was told where to go, where to find it, and it was like a voice telling me, "Go to here, go in there, and it'll be on the shelf." And I just went and got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is following your divine guidance. Yes, definitely.
And one time I wanted to see a person real bad, and I missed them, and they just said, "He's over there. Just go see him. He's there now." And it would be a hit and miss, but that time it just happened, and and it was like something. I mean, really told me to go. He'll be there.
Yep. And that's using your natural abilities right there, without using any type of tools.
Okay. So just tune in, but that I really think that's coming from, I don't know where, like an angel or divine.
I would say it is.
Yeah.
I would definitely say it is. Well, keep it up. You do well. They're proud of you, by the way.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I can feel that you're very confident in your ability to perceive, which is a good thing, because the reason why a lot of people can't use their intuition is because they just believe that what they tune into is wrong. they always second guess it, and I think that's why people lose out on a lot of information. It's because they just second guess it to the point where their doubts negate it completely. Because when you're putting that doubt out there, I mean, you're not going to get positive back, you know?
Right.
But no, your guides, and they're your guides, definitely. They're very proud of you, and they're glad that you're doing what you're doing, because you're not only helping yourself, but you're helping other people too. And thank you for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, okay, anything else?
No, I'll listen in. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. You're welcome.
Thank you for calling in.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, next caller here. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hello, it's Mindy from New York.
Hi, Mindy.
Hello, Mindy.
Hello, my two favorite people on the radio. How are you?
Wonderful.
Good.
How are you?
I have to join in, on this subject.
Oh, good.
I don't know if you know, I do tarot readings for like 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
And there you go.
Yeah, they're very clear. There was a time that, because of the church, influencing me, that I stopped, and I always felt guilty, but the ability never stopped, and God never made me feel uncomfortable, in a prayer. It was always external people. I'm way past that now. But my point to this is, your subject is trying to do readings or talk about readings without tools, right? Okay. I like the cards, and I'll tell you why. It's not that I need them, which I will explain also, but it gives me focus, and it opens and closes. So that when I'm done, like last night I did 2 readings, and you take it home with you, and I had to keep saying, Mindy, give their energy back to them.
Yeah.
And the reading is over. So in that way, I like them. But what happens is they do start me off. I can see, boom, everything that's going on. But I'm off and running. The cards are a very small part of the reading. They're kind of like the outline. But I do like the fact that they open it and close it, because this way the energy comes with the cards and goes with the cards, mostly.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I like that. But I see more and more. People can, ask me questions during the readings. I'm not turning any cards to find the answer. I'm already in the zone. I can feel it coming at me, the information. So they're a very small part of it, but they do have... And I can also tell if something is responding to me. Like I have that pendulum. So my whole life I never really got them to work good or whatever. I didn't try them too many times. My girlfriend once bought me one. She thought it answered every question of her life. I didn't find it did anything. But I had bought something, believe it or not. It was like a bobby pin gold with a chain and then a teardrop heavy pendant on it. It was a weird thing. And one day I go, this looks like a pendulum. Let me try it and see if... And it was spinning and talking. So that's my other thing. Sometimes some things will respond. I used to do psychometry, with a piece of jewelry. But it's not always up to me what will respond and when and how good. Sometimes I could throw a deck of cards and read it. So there's so many things going on. Of course, the most important that we stay open and we stay in the zone. But I'm curious, what is your point of saying to do readings without tools? What's your point? I want to hear that now.
Well, what we were discussing earlier is, in my own experience, and I know a few other people whom I've talked to have also expressed this, that when we depend too much on the tool, where we start losing faith in our own ability to read, that's when we are focusing too much on the tool and focusing less on our own ability that's within us. For me, what you were saying was actually very interesting because, let me use an analogy or a metaphor. To me, you were saying that for you, the cards are the frame, but you paint the picture in the frame.
Not exactly.
Not exactly?
I'm the straw. God is the substance giving the information, and I'm just the vessel, and the person is receiving it. I'm not doing nothing but staying out of the way and allowing the information to flow. So I'm not painting. I don't have even a creative process in it. I'm making sure that the information coming through me, I'm saying it as accurate as possible. The only creative part, or the part of me sometimes, is really working it to make sure the person gets it. But none of it do I own. Like I think of creativity. Right. I think of, although creativity is the same, it does flow through you. But I'm not thinking anything, or judging anything, or shaping anything. You understand that?
Yep, that
right.
Makes sense.
You're still getting it through you, though, and you're blurting it out, if you want to call it that way.
I don't want to hold it.
No, I don't want to hold it either, because you hold it, that's not good. But the tools, now the way you use tools, that is the way that I've learned how to get up into the alpha state. And so I definitely understand that process. And when you said that you just use it for that purpose to get you into the flow, and then you go from there and you don't turn cards over, you just go with it, that's cool. But there are so many out there that continually turn the cards when it's not necessarily necessary.
Well, I get what you're saying now, and I understand what Donny's saying. Because let's say we're going to do a pendulum, which I don't particularly like to do, but a pendulum session, so to speak. And every question is going to depend on that. So I'm not letting anything through me. It's answering. It's doing the work. If the meaning of each card is your reading, forget it. That's not a reading. Because those cards disappear during my reading. And every time there's something different. But I understand now I got it. If the tools are the only answer without anything of us, any intuition.
Right.
Yeah, that's a problem. That's not a reading to me. And maybe some people think it is. I don't know.
Well, and for me personally, I always view myself as a messenger, and it's how I articulate that message that I'm getting that also contributes to the reading. If say I'm doing a tarot reading, which I don't read tarot, I mostly just read runes. If I'm doing a tarot reading and I have to look up in a book what all of the different meanings are for the cards, and I'm telling it to the person, that's not me using my own intuition. That's me using the definitions in the book of each card. And that's, I guess that's what I was also referring to as being a part of the tool, because we use that logical part and we depend on that logical part to give us the answers, when we should be paying respect to our own ability to understand the messages that we're getting and articulating them through our own ability as opposed to through the book or through, the specific definitions of each card.
I agree. But that takes dedication and willingness. That takes a lot more. I actually, not long ago, like a year ago, they opened somewhere near my job, and I went for a reading. And they said, oh, she's so great, or whatever. She read each card from the book. I was horrified. I was embarrassed for her, but she wasn't. So some people think maybe that spirit put that card in that place at that moment and the book, so that's your answer. I feel like they may take it serious. I don't know.
Well, and the thing is, I can understand using a book in the beginning. I mean, taking point, when I started reading runes, there are 25 runes in a set. There are, a zillion different meanings for each rune. and it's really hard to memorize all of them. But once I did a couple readings using the book. Once I started assimilating the energy in each rune to my own energy, then I didn't have to depend on the book as much, because they almost created their own meaning, regardless their actual specific meaning listed in the book, right? So that's when I started becoming more secure in how I was doing it and how I was perceiving the message.
And it's also a rune next to a rune next to a rune. What the combination, like if there's 5 in a row, how you as the reader are going to put that together and interpret the fact that they're next to each other. That's something else too.
Right.
Because the runes, I mean, if I ever did them, I used to do them, I would have to look them up, truthfully, unless I devote many, many years. Like, in other words, I took tarot class, let's say at 21, and I read those cards because the teacher used to do that, a daily reading. Like before I went to bed, I would do the Celtic Cross, a spread like to relax, and I would read out of the book. And one day, they said, and I don't know how, because there's not a card or a page for this, that a woman was going to get put in jail. Some woman was going to go to jail, whatever. The next day, my sister got arrested. And I said, those cards told me that last night. I knew they started talking. I have chills now just saying it. From then on, I stopped the book. And they never stopped talking. But it was 20 years. But the thing is, I was never interested in doing it for anyone, so I didn't care. It was like self-help for me. Oh, let me see what they're saying to me. Then, as I did little friends or clients, and then it really started to flow. But 20 years of dedication to them, of feeling comfortable with them and close, and I did. Even though I read it from the book, after that long, you are involved with those cards. So not that it takes everyone 20 years, I'm not saying that, but I suspect if I got interested, because I like those runes, that it would take somewhat of a dedication. I could be wrong, I don't know.
Yep, it does.
It does, definitely.
Okay.
I've been there.
Okay, guys, we have 1 minute and 40, now less than that, so I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you, everyone, for coming on the show. Thank you, Mindy. It's always a pleasure. Come earlier next time if you could, please.
It is.
I don't know why I always miss you, but go ahead.
And thank you again. Thank you, everybody. God bless you. And follow your heart, for only you know which path is right for you. So with that said, have a great week, and we'll catch you guys on the flip side.